Hi guys, it's Kristen and welcome back to my floor. Today we are going to be talking about Minerva once more. I made a video a week or two ago talking about whether or not Minerva is a real college, which, spoiler alert, it is. And today we are going to be talking about what you learn at Minerva, because the curriculum is different than most colleges and there's not a ton of detail about how exactly that works out. But because, as I talked about in that other video, since the Minerva project plans to make money by leasing Minerva's actual curriculum, I can't just show you everything because they would get angry at me because it is their intellectual property. However, I can talk about it without giving all of the details on how to actually teach it. So today I'm going to be giving the perspective of a student to another student. Whether you are actually a student or not, that's the conversation I'm having in my head, and just talk about what happens in these classes that I've been taking. And specifically today I'm going to focus on the first year, because as I was writing out a script for this video, I realized that there is a lot to talk about, and I probably shouldn't put it all in one video because it would be horrendously long. Also, since I have only finished 2 years at Minerva, I don't have much more knowledge than you can gain from Minerva's actual website on the 3rd and 4th year. So I think I'm going to make this video about the first year, another video about the second year, and then talk about the later ones once I know about them firsthand, because that's the point here. So first, how do the classes actually work? We take them online on a platform that Minerva designed, and it is a totally flipped classroom, which means that you do readings before class so that you know all of the knowledge about what's going to be talked about in class, and usually you also have some sort of small homework assignment that goes along with those readings to make sure that you really focus in on the certain specific things you need to have ready for class, and that homework is always, as far as I can remember, utilized in class, or meant to be utilized in class. Sometimes stuff happens with time and you don't get to it, but it's always supposed to be used in class. So then class is totally discussion based, but it also includes a poll at the beginning and the end, kind of like a little pop quiz, is how they say it. The first one is basically to make sure you actually read the readings and understood the readings. Some sort of question just to show that yes, I know about the thing that we're going to be talking about very soon. This is both to pre-test your knowledge sort of in a way, but also just so that after you actually do the little poll, everyone talks about it to make sure everyone is in fact on the same page. And then there's another one at the end of the class, which is supposed to show that you were engaged with class and what you sort of are taking away from it, which is related to the science of learning and how you have to recall stuff, and that helps you remember it better, and so on and so forth. And then outside of class, you also have assignments, which are done after you read about a topic and then you talk about it in class and you get through a whole unit about a certain thing. You'll have an assignment to sort of show how well you've solidified all of that. And then at the end of the semester, there's a final project, which is supposed to synthesize everything that has happened the entire semester. So, in the first year, all Minervans take the same 4 classes for the entire year. They're year-long courses. This sort of replaces the typical general or core education requirements at any other college. Once you do these, you are free to take whatever classes you wish, as long as you end up with a major and all that. And these classes are supposed to be based on skills and not content. The argument being that when you take Psych 101, you might memorize a bunch of stuff about psychology, but you don't really come away with any skills that you were explicitly taught to apply in other areas of your life, so that core requirement might have been a bit of a waste. I use psych just because it's the first thing that came to mind, but psychology is actually something that's pretty useful no matter how you study it, I think. But insert other core requirement. So the skills, these are kind of structured around are supposed to be critical thinking, creative thinking, effective communication, and effective interaction, which are all like really big, vague terms that I saw on the website, but I didn't fully understand. But each of them kind of lines up to a class, and I'm going to walk through each of those individually now. So first, critical thinking. This one, I think, is supposed to be related to formal analysis, which is sort of the math-ish class that I took in my first year. Because it is supposed to be teaching you like critical thinking and not just like how to solve certain math problems, it doesn't really teach you that many concrete like math or even programming skills, because we did have to code for that class. It sort of teaches logic and then how you can use that logic to solve problems, which is where you use programming to write some like little algorithms. And then we spent a lot of time on probability and statistics, because you need to know how that actually works to succeed in pretty much any area. But the emphasis wasn't as much on knowing the equations, but more so being able to interpret the results correctly and talk about what different probabilities actually meant, to talk about what different statistics were actually showing or might be just misleading you to believe. And then we talked about, I think, just different fallacies people are prone to, so different ways that you think that are not actually right, and the logic of what is actually true. So a lot of like logic, basically. I would say it's a lot more a class structured around how to reason than a math or anything like that class specifically. Next, creative thinking was supposed to be, I think, the topic of empirical analysis, which was kind of like science in the way that formal was kind of like math. It did involve a lot of scientific theory or scientific method, like the theory of, scientific method, a lot of scientific method. But we also talked a lot about how to solve problems, which is something you theoretically do in science, but is a bit different than what you are strictly doing in like a lab environment. But like how to approach a problem, which is a creative thinking for sure. And then also how to go about research. What is the right way to like use hypotheses and interpret your results, and so on and so forth. And then also, very related, we talked a lot about biases in that class, which is related to fallacies in formal analysis, but different, I guess. The way we approached it, that researchers might psychologically lead themselves astray from actually seeking truth. At this point, you can probably see that these classes were kind of a hodgepodge. It's very difficult to describe what they are really about in like one line, which is why I'm kind of like talking through all the different units that we did so you get a better sense of what is actually happening. I might also give an example of an assignment, like for empirical, you might have an assignment that asks you to write a research proposal, so design an experiment and justify it. Moving on, effective communication was covered in a class called Multimodal Communication, which was a lot more stereotypical of like a English writing class in the first semester. We read some literature, we ended up writing an essay about it, but we also spent a lot more time talking about how you go about building that essay as opposed to just the literature itself. Although we did talk about analyzing writing, but the emphasis was more on your own writing. And then second semester, we got more into the multimodal part and talked about all other forms of communication, like art, music, various things you can do online, podcasts, presentations, just how to use different mediums to communicate. Pretty straightforward, that one, I think. The last one, and arguably the least straightforward, is complex systems. Complex being very important there. And this, I would argue, is one of the best classes Minerva has put together, that is the most unique and completely different from what most university students are learning. And this one is supposed to be about effective interaction. So it's generally about trying to get a better grasp on how people work in relation to each other. Like, why do people do the things that we do? And it uses a theory called complex systems, which exists but is mostly like a niche that some graduate students and post-grad people are into, but that not a lot of people are talking about broadly, I guess. And you spend most of the first semester just trying to understand how that works, what a complex system is. But then in the second semester, you try applying it more. And at this point, I will say that I'm talking about how I experienced these classes, but that they have supposedly changed greatly since then. So if I'm saying, oh, this happens first semester and then this happens second semester, and then you go to Minerva 2 years from now and that's not exactly what happens, or that's not even exactly what happened last year, that's fine. I'm just talking about what we were taught and in what order, to give you an idea of what is taught and what the things they're trying to teach are. So I think that pretty much covers it for first year. The only other thing I wanted to talk about is the final projects for this year, because they are a bit special, different, weird. They are also changing a lot. So I'm going to talk about what I did in very broad, vague terms, because I know a lot of what happened was similar, but it also changed. So basically, first semester, you have to do a project which encompasses all 4 of those classes in one project, and you had to write a proposal and then execute it yourself. And you had to incorporate things from all those different classes, and you got graded on all those things from all those different classes. And then second semester was a very similar idea, but it was a group project. Oh boy. Group projects. You might think at Minerva, the students are all awesome. Group projects should be so smooth, but group projects will always be group projects, just because everyone's different. Everyone has different schedules, everyone has different ideas, everyone has different priorities, but it was the same thing. You propose something, you get some feedback on the proposal, and then you try to do it, and it has to incorporate things you're learning across all 4 of the classes. Also, all of the classes do use content in teaching you these skills. Like, we read specific books, we talked about specific problems, looked at specific art pieces, but the emphasis was never on knowing about that content. It was more about how you were using the skills in relation to that content. But that does make it a little bit biased or uneven in terms of, if you're really familiar with the content and really comfortable with the content, it is easier to apply the skills. If you're unclear on the content, struggling at that level, applying the skills is almost impossible. So people who have like a better background in the things that happen to be covered or pick it up a little faster tended to be better off, even though it was about the skills. Kind of weird ground there where you can't really separate the two. There is content. That's just not what you're supposedly graded on, but it will impact your grade. And it can be kind of cool because you kind of jump from thing to thing in terms of what the like meat of what you're talking about is. So you get exposed to a lot of different stuff, which can be nice, but if you're really like antsy to go deep on one of those things, you don't really get the opportunity. If you have any questions, please leave them below. If I get a decent amount of them, maybe I'll make another video clarifying myself. Otherwise, I will definitely reply to you down there. And I am going to make a video about the second year experience at Minerva in terms of academics specifically very soon. Look out for that. Subscribe if you want to see it first. And thanks for dropping by. I hope you enjoyed your time here on my floor. Thanks for watching. Bye!